Hello and welcome to another episode of the Chiro podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Glass, and today we're making a professional chiropractic connection out in Italy with Dr. Peter Lawrence, or just Peter. Um, Peter, can you introduce yourself and just share a little bit about your background, maybe your upbringing, what attracted you to becoming a chiropractor?
Well, good morning, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here for you and all of the people that are going to be listening in at one point or another. I'm happy to do this. And my background is a little bit, I'd say, typical for a chiropractor, from my generation anyway. Okay. And I know things have been evolving and they'll continue to evolve, which is really cool. But from my perspective, my dad was a chiropractor. So I basically grew up in a home office. He was a chiropractor before I was born, and so by the time I was born, he was already practicing. He had a couple of practices, one in the Bronx and one on Long Island, where we lived, and so I guess that was my basic fundamental background in an introduction to chiropractic. Um, yeah,
Mhm.
that's
Can you talk about some of the unique insights that you were able to gain as you got older and more aware and more conscious and closer to that opportunity to going to chiropractic school that, maybe some things he said to you or some things that you were privileged to become aware of through your experience of growing up with him that really helped you as you went to chiropractic school?
yeah, sure. Well, first of all, my dad was very dedicated, both on the professional and in terms of he was working with the chiropractic profession very strongly. New York State Chiropractic Association, and the before that he was with the Federation of Chiropractic Licensing Boards and did a lot of early regulatory stuff. So he was in the licensing. He practiced it actually before chiropractic was licensed. He practiced, yeah. It wasn't licensed until 1963 in New York, and he
Hmm.
started in 49. So he, I think, showed me and demonstrated just through his actions that being an active participant was really the only way to go in terms of life. And I got into chiropractic late, meaning I had a whole career before I became a chiropractor. Um, and so I kind of took a roundabout way to get into chiropractic. And I didn't appreciate a lot of the things that I saw every day because I took them for granted. I'd see people come crawling into the office and then walk out smiling and skipping out and laughing, and the changes that I would see. And my dad was doing house calls still at that time. So we would go on Saturdays. Would be a great thing for me to go. I was the oldest one. So we'd go into the office in the Bronx on Saturdays, cross over the Whitestone. Before we crossed over the Whitestone Bridge from Long Island, we would we would stop at this lady's house, a very old lady in a big old mansion in Whitestone, Queens, by the water, and he would go and take care of her, and then we'd get back in the car and go to the Bronx, and he'd work all day in the Bronx, and I would go to the Yankee games because his office was 2 blocks from the Yankee Stadium. So I'll go sit in the bleachers for 50 cents and watch the Yankees play. But in reality, I get a chance to watch my dad work 6 days a week, work really hard, um, start at the bottom and really work his way up through the profession and also with the profession as the profession grew, because the profession was not as well accepted or respected in the 20th century as it is now. I mean, we're very fortunate with how chiropractic has kind of mainstreamed into the consciousness of the cool people, I'd say, the younger people, the people that are, doing all the right things, eating well and doing their exercising. And they know chiropractic is pretty much part of their lifestyle. From what my experience is, a lot of the hip young people are into this. When I was in, my dad was doing it. It was like only the crazy people go to chiropractors, or the ones that are just so desperate that there's nothing else to do. So
Mhm.
I guess that's part of it. I got a chance to watch the development of chiropractic, and you take it for granted, not take it for granted how things have developed, and how much we should really appreciate the difference in cultural values and the cultural shift that's allowed chiropractic to be more accepted. We're very fortunate nowadays. We didn't have that advantage even when I started practice. It's definitely, evolved. So that's one of the good things.
Can you give a really brief look back at the history of chiropractic, and we could talk about the rebellious nature of chiropractors maybe having to practice without any legislation in place and being jailed,
Yeah.
that current students entering into the profession today might appreciate, just because they'll see that, and maybe shift your camera a little bit to the other direction so that you don't keep moving out of the
I'm
screen. Either
trying
that
to.
or shift your seat.
I'm using the iPad. So it
Ah,
seems like I'm off angle here. Oh, maybe that's better. Okay.
that's better. Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. Um, yes. Well, like I alluded to earlier, when my dad graduated in 1949, the practice of chiropractic was illegal still in New York State. And it wasn't until 1963 that it became legal. Okay, so it was one of the last states to become legalized, but there was quite a battle all over the country for many years regarding the ability to practice chiropractic. And there were many chiropractors who went to jail. My dad did not go to jail, but uh, when he started practicing, there was the chiropractic community, even in New York, was pretty close knit. So one person or one chiropractor would get a visit from a couple of inspectors. It would be a woman with a red coat and a man with a black fedora. Okay, and that would go on the telephone. Everybody would know, like within a couple of minutes, that okay, these inspectors are coming around, and don't let them in. So there was a very real threat that you could be arrested, even in New York, into the 1960s. That now it all changed. Obviously, there was a very, very serious lawsuit and law case that came about with the Chester Wilk trial, and where it became uncovered that the American Medical Association and various other medical groups were basically collaborating and colluding to restrict and eliminate and contain the profession of chiropractic. And this was done in federal court, and they were found guilty of basically trying to antitrust suits of, eliminate a profession, a legalized profession. So that was some bred some really interesting and attracted some very interesting characters. Most of the first people that became chiropractors knew they were going to be practicing either illegally under great threat or great stress, either financially or legally and socially as well. Because even I remember as a kid growing up, there were a lot of my friends or people would make fun of my father and call him a quack. It was very common. So there was a built-in prejudice against chiropractors for many, many years, which I think still persists to this day on a more subtle level. But getting back to the rebellious part, which is a good part, I think. I remember that we never got shots when we were kids. We never got inoculated. We never were immunized. And one time, my mother, who was not as open-minded as my dad or as philosophically as tuned in, decided, took us to the pediatrician to get shots. And so we went into the room, and like I think my brother went first, and he got it one shot in his butt, and we called the pediatrician Uncle Bernie. His name was Uncle Bernie. His name was Bernie. And so as soon as he gave him the shot, my brother jumped up and said, "Uncle Bernie bit me." And he ran out the door. So as soon as he ran out the door, I ran out the door with him. I wasn't going to get the shot either. So we ran all the way home and told my dad that like my mom was doing this to us. And so that would cause a little friction at home. But you could see that there was this always an undertow of you're doing something against the system being a chiropractor.
Can we fast forward all the way to today and just maybe give us some insights as to how we still to this day represent something that is against the greater system, the greater kind of pushing of certain information, pushing of certain approaches on the general population of this planet, how we represent maybe something that is countercurrent or against the grain?
Well, I think the best example, even though I'm not practicing in the States anymore, but when I was in the States and I practiced for more than 20 years in New York City, it was looking at it from the insurance reimbursement point of view, which was, I mean, especially for injuries, on the job injuries or personal injury, work comp injuries, they had a scale, a fee schedule of what they would pay you for a visit, no matter what you did. And it was like maybe $15 or $18. The same visit done by a physical therapist or an osteopath or an orthopedist would be $200. And you go, wait a second. Why can they get $200 for the same visit that I'm getting $20 for? So that to me was, that to me is, I think, a very, very obvious, blatant example of a built-in prejudice that's still in the system. Also, if you go to a chiropractor, you have to be approved by a medical doctor first in order to need a gatekeeper to get in to even go to the chiropractor and then get your visits approved. And the chiropractor, then I have to sit down and write all my notes on my patients and then send them in to the supervisor at the insurance company, who's not even a medical doctor, who's not even, maybe a nurse, maybe. That would be, so you can see the built-in, I think, prejudice or disrespect, which I don't think the medical profession or any of the other healthcare professions have to go through or jump through the same hoops when they have to get their reimbursement. So that's a pretty basic one.
I mean, just for clarity, we don't need a referral for people to come see us as chiropractors today, or at least that's never been my experience. I think maybe if you do play within the insurance game,
yeah,
then you might. Although I'm pretty sure you still don't. I think we're considered primary care providers, but I also have never really I've never really engaged in accepting insurance. I don't know the details. I just
good for you. Good for you. I think that's probably the wisest thing. Unfortunately, when I started practicing, everybody took insurance. This was in 1987. And that was the end of the golden age already. They called it the Mercedes 80s because a lot of chiropractors bought a lot of Mercedes in the 80s because of their billing habits or whatever it was. Bottom line is that all, I'm getting lost here. That all got shifted. That all got shifted probably in the 90s. And by the time you got out of school, it was non-existent anymore. Cash is pretty much the only way to go. And practicing in Italy, that's the way we practice also. And I think practicing outside of the standard traditional medical system and model has a lot of advantages and is much better because you're not bound by their rules and regulations, which we've seen flip flop in the last couple of years with the whole COVID debacle. And so, it's nice to be outside the system. And I think I'd love for chiropractors to stay outside the system and not dive into it, which is for financial security or social status or whatever reason they deem as necessary. It's much better to be independent. And that's been my experience. It's a
Hmm.
much, much healthier way to practice. You're more congruent with your principles and your philosophy, and at least mine. I mean,
Can you
I
give
can
us
only
a
speak.
deep dive into your practice, what your practice looks like, feels like, maybe when you were practicing for 20 years in New York, how you set up your practice, and
Yeah.
now your practice here in Italy, what's different, why you changed it, how you've refined it throughout the years?
Okay. Well, I my practice evolved from watching the way my father practiced and when my brother practiced. Basically, just copied what they did, and they had a certain model of practicing which I followed, which was a pretty much full spine, symptom based practice, diversified full spine practice. Um, my dad was using a lot of modalities. He was very much considered himself a chiropractic physician. He was from that era where they had such an inferiority complex. I think he was a smart man and very intelligent, so he needed to, I think, qualify that with chiropractic physician. At any rate, my brother and I didn't use those same modalities and practiced a little bit more of a just traditional straight hands-on practice method. Oh, in New York, I had semi-open room, meaning that there were doors that would open up in between that I would keep open, so that I would leave the doors open, but there was some privacy, um, and that I did for 20 years, and it was an insurance-based practice. And as the insurance kind of got worse, my practice got tighter and tighter, and it was very tough to make a switch with a lot of my patients and get them, if they've been used to paying nothing or next to nothing, to have them pay full cash for. It was a difficult thing to really pull off. So in 2005, I actually sold the practice, and when I sold the practice, I took a few years off and just coached other chiropractors. And a few of my chiropractors I was coaching were international people over in Italy. And so they started telling me about their practice and all that, and it was sounded very interesting. And I liked the way they were practicing, and they were outside the system. Everything was cash, and it kind of sounded like the thing that I always wanted to do, but never was able to pull off when you're paying in 1989, 1990, $6,000 a month rent for 1,000 square feet in Midtown Manhattan. That's in the 80s and the 90s. Now it would probably be like 15, 20,000. I don't know. I don't know what it would be. But so you got to generate a lot of money. And money was coming in from insurance at that point. So that was the way to go. Once that, you know, dried up, I realized really quickly that I was in a lot of trouble. So that I was not going to be able to sustain that. So at any rate, I decided to take a break. And after listening to these guys in Italy, one of them asked me if I wanted to come over and check out his practice. And I did. And it was a beautiful practice. And they had a practice in Lake Como. And they had a second practice in Reggio Emilia. And they had 8 chiropractors working at their practice. So they were a busy practice. And they needed someone to help fill in with them in Reggio Emilia. That was their biggest difficulty. So I volunteered myself. And that's how I ended up here. And, never looked back. Worked with a year for them and then went out on my own and just have had my own practice. And I'm in Treviso now, and I practice upper cervical exclusive, knee chest style, which is a different kind of. If most students are probably not going to know anything I'm talking about, so I'll explain that chiropractic has many different types of approaches. Some are more light touch, some are more firm or vigorous, forceful touch. Some are no touch. It's kind of an incredible profession in that there's so much variability. My particular technique focuses on the junction between the cervical or neck, cervical spine, the neck, and the cranium or the skull, the cervical cranial junction. That's a very, very essential key junction of communication between the brain and the body. And because of the particular anatomical makeup of that area, it predisposes that area to more movement and more mismovement or misalignment, which causes direct pressure on the brainstem and the flow of cerebral spinal fluid and blood flow to and from the brain. So there could be a lot of congestion, both neurologically and hemodynamically or fluid wise, in the whole head if the top of the neck is not correct and sitting correctly on the neck. And that area is the area that I've been focusing on exclusively for the last 10 years. The knee chest approach is a certain posture that you put the patient in for the adjustment that creates what we consider the easiest way and the most leveraged way with the least amount of trauma in a stabilized position to isolate and specifically affect that one bone. It's really painless, it's really fast, but it requires a certain technique. There are other upper cervical techniques that use instruments or other side posture techniques or toggles. We're using different kinds of tables, but my particular technique is called the knee chest posture, and one of many different techniques in chiropractic, which is what makes it such a great profession for so many different kinds of people.
Hmm. How do you observe the subluxation, which is such a specific place in the body? How do you identify the subluxation and locate exactly how it's misaligned when you're about to provide the adjustment?
Okay, well, for the first, it's a two-part answer. The first part is the analysis, which requires thermography or measuring of the skin temperature of the spine, specifically the neck, and checking to see if that spine has any misalignments. You'll start to see some various patterns or things are changing in the I'm talking. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
It's
I know I was
okay.
making noise. Okay. My wife she doesn't realize I'm doing this. Okay. The so we use thermography or heat interpretation of the skin. We use also a cone beam CT scan, which is a three-dimensional X-ray image of the neck and the upper cervical spine and the skull. We also use a palpation, which is very important as well. Once we've determined that there is this subluxation, you can pretty much usually feel it as well. So what I'll do is before an adjustment, we will check them with a control of a scan to see if their neck temperature is in the same pattern as when they first came in and they were subluxated. And we check their leg lengths. Now, why do we check their leg lengths? Well, there's something called the dura mater, and the dura mater is a sheath, and it's a covering or a meninges that covers the entire spine and the brain, and it's completely encompassed and whole and enclosed. And it's got a lot of attachments along the entire spine as well as the skull to attach this membrane so that it doesn't just slop around. If the top bone in the neck has moved out of place, it's going to pull tension on the dura mater as well as the entire brain spinal cord, which is inside the dura mater, and will create an artificial leg length change where one leg will appear longer than the other because it affects all the way from the cranium down to the sacrum, this type of tension. And so we'll see a one leg length, usually a little bit shorter than the other or markedly shorter prior to the adjustment. Those are the two criteria or objective indicators we will use to determine if you need an adjustment. And obviously, the palpation or feeling with your hands, once they get in that knee chest position or posture, that's all been predetermined. The line of drive, what side you're going to adjust, how you're going to adjust it from looking at the CAT scan or the cone beam CAT scan, and that gives us the listing.
Mm-hmm. Is the
Make sense?
cone beam CAT scan a
Yeah,
relatively new diagnostic that you have begun using? And if
totally.
so, what's the investment? Who are the companies that create those? Like, how did you get your hands on one of those? Because I've interviewed people on here who mention the cone beam CAT scan a lot, but
Right.
nobody has ever really talked about the nuts and bolts of like how you actually go about getting one, installing one,
Okay.
using one. What is it?
Okay, well, basically, it's if you've ever been to the dentist these days, you notice they have a panorama. They'll do a panorama view of your teeth. Okay, it's basically they'll put your head or your chin, it rests in a little like a support, and the X-ray unit spins around your whole head, and it takes different slices along the entire like a CAT scan in a three-dimensional 360-degree plane. That machine then translates all those images into a computer program. The
You're
computer
falling out of the
program,
picture.
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get you to the picture. And so what happens is that particular image then is stored in a computer program, which you then it's all part of the software of the actual device. And what happens is then you just reconstruct it from any particular angle or view that you want in 360 degrees. And you can strip away tissue. You can go down to the bone. You can go to just look at the nerves. You can look at the arteries and the veins. You can look at the muscles. You can look at the tendons. It's like this, you just take it, peel it off one layer at a time. It's like three-dimensional in vitro anatomy of that particular patient. So you pick up all kinds of stuff that you just fly right over your head on an X-ray, on that you just never will be able to image. We've picked up so many of those. The long, elongated styloid, the syndrome, Eagle syndrome, picked up a whole bunch of those. Not that they really are they're just consequential findings. But again, you can see a lot of anomalies and the upper cervical spine or malformations. And the upper cervical spine has by far the most malformations of any part of the spine or the body that are just natural. Almost 75% of all people have some kind of a malformation or irregularity in their upper cervical spine. It's just they don't know if it comes from childbirth, in utero, the head's a certain way, but there's all kinds of distortions in pretty much 75% of the pie, and we see them all. So then you know you can also modify the way you're going to adjust. Now, how much do those machines cost? Well, you can get a used one for probably about 75 grand. $75,000. Basically, the same. They're the guys that sell to the dentists. but you need a special unit that's got a larger field, okay, a larger field of vision. The dentist ones are usually narrow. We want one that opens up a little larger so that you can get more, you get the whole head. So it's, they have machines that are designed that way, and they have a lot of different brands. I can't really endorse any one particular, but we're the first chiropractic office in all of Europe to be utilizing this technique. And I believe this technology is going to be just the only way to go. You won't need, I don't know if they have these for lumbar spine and thoracic spine. I don't think they've got those set up yet. But the cervical cone beam is just, it's just rocking and rolling, and it's just, everybody talks about it. That's the way to go. I recommend that if you're going to practice upper, or if you do practice upper cervical. I don't know if you do, but
It sounds as though if that is going to become a more utilized diagnostic within the chiropractic profession, that chiropractors are going to have to team up, and multiple people will have to be using one unit,
yeah,
if it matters that much and if the value is placed that high on it. I know that there's a lot of people in the Upper Cervical Council through the ICA who are studying cone beam
yeah,
CAT scans through, I believe, Sherman College. And
yes.
that's where that topic got brought up, and I just thank you for like kind of describing in more detail what it is and why it's so valuable to you as a provider.
As an upper cervical provider, I think it's essential. I think it's indispensable. I think for the for the chiropractors that are going to, really focus on upper cervical work, it's the only way to go. It really is. You'll see things that you'll never would believe that you would ever could see, which is fantastic for us, and it just makes me excited. But I don't know if it's that applicable to, chiropractors that do other, techniques. But for the upper cervical group, yeah, that's the way to go.
Awesome. Can
Yeah.
you kind of just break down? You said you've only been practicing upper cervical exclusively for 10 years. Can you
Yes.
break down the resources or programs or education that you went back and started to really immerse yourself in and study on a deeper level when you decided you wanted to practice specifically upper cervical?
Sure. Well, I got myself a couple of books. The Upper Cervical Complex, Upper Cervical Subluxation Complex. There's two books by Erickson, Kirk Erickson. I have them upstairs. I don't have the exact names of them if you want. But what I did was I went and I got a couple of books that are very well researched about upper cervical. In fact, if you look through all the chiropractic literature, I think that the upper cervical research is probably the most in depth, is the most serious research, or has done the most extensive, not most serious, most extensive research, and the most serious from an academic point of view. I think that the upper cervical docs are really leading the pack. You've got, of course, you've got the functional guys, the functional neurologists, who are again in that same level, but they're not really upper cervical specific, but they're another group of chiropractors that I think are really very much in front of a lot of this research stuff. But what I do is I bought a couple of books, and then I looked around and try to figure out, well, I had been adjusted upper cervical, knee chest. That was my introduction into upper cervical. So naturally, I looked for that, and I found Rob Kessinger, who is a knee chest doc, has what they call the Knee Chest Upper Cervical Society. There's probably about 6 or 7 different knee chest groups. This is the other thing about upper cervical. Everybody has their own little group, and like, so it can get a little weird because they all have their own little clique and clan, but they all mean well. But there's like Ian Davis Tremaine out by you, and then there's on the west, the East Coast, there's other guys. In the South, there's guys. They all have their own little kind of niche of how they're approaching it, which is great. It's like personality driven. but in general, they're all on the same page, upper cervical wise. So I found Knee Chest Upper Cervical Society was doing seminars in Europe. And so what I did was first I did a series of webinars with them for months. And they have a very in-depth series with webinars through all of the things they do. And then they came for like a 3-day intensive. A couple of times we did it here, and the second time then we got certified, meaning we took tests. And so you got certified after you, and the tests were pretty in depth. I mean, for a guy that's been out of practice since 1987, I thought it was pretty in depth test. And so I did the Knee Chest Upper Cervical Society. There, I don't know if it's still active. Is the art of the subluxation, which was Sean Dill, Andy Roberts, and then Sean Dill. But I don't know if they're really active so much anymore. There's Ian Davis Tremaine does his upper cervical revolution out by you. There's the guys down in the south, the brothers. Uh, they do another. There's a whole bunch around. There's also other upper cervical. There's the Blair Society, which is another upper cervical technique. There's the orthospinology group. There was the Kale group, which was knee chest, which I don't think is in existence anymore. But that's where Kessinger came from. So there's like a whole. You need a whole day to discuss all that. But my training was with Knee Chest Upper Cervical Society, who I recommend very highly. They're serious. They don't do a lot of seminars. That's the only thing. It's hard to get them. I'm pressing them to come back to Europe again next year, trying to set up another group because we don't have enough upper cervical doctors here in Europe, and that's been my main focus and kind of motivation. I want to expand the upper cervical community here in Europe.
Can you talk more about the community in Europe or just what it's like to practice chiropractic in Europe? We have Barcelona Chiropractic College, we have the New
Yeah,
Scotland Chiropractic College, we
right.
have McTimony, and then there are some others, but those are the three
Madrid.
that I'm focused on helping grow through this
Okay.
podcast. So,
Okay.
if you had students come to your office in Italy, where would you recommend maybe that they go or consider going? And then
Come to
what,
my office.
huh?
They come to my office. Any students can come to my office anytime they want and see how we practice. I recommend, I mean, there's a chiropractic school in France that's becoming a very big movement now. The French are getting really strong. They've got a school, and also Holland. They don't have a school, but they've got a lot of chiropractors in Holland. I think that Europe is a much look. I'm prejudiced. I live here. My wife is French, and I lived here before in my other career before I was a chiropractor. So I've been in Europe for a long time. I know Europe. I appreciate Europe, and I understand Europe. And I think that Europe it's a great place to practice because it never really got so spoiled like the United States did with all of the insurance stuff and just the whole political infighting in the states in chiropractic never really happened in Europe. So they're in one sense they're more united. They get put up a more united front, and it's a little bit more consistent the message, which is nice. Everything over here is still pretty much you're getting a lot of people that have no idea, they have no preconceived notions, or they think chiropractic is a massage therapist. So I think that Europe is a fantastic place to practice and to live. Um, every place has its challenges. Every refuge has its price. Um, but I feel that the lifestyle, the quality of life in Europe is I resonate very well with it. And I mean, I'm a lifelong New Yorker, and my kids still live in New York. And but you know what? Honestly, from what I see, reported in different various journalistic sources. I'm kind of scared about what's going on in the States. Just the violence, the level of anger and the level of kind of division is so deep now and so just out of control. It scares me. And in Europe, I don't know, maybe ignorance is bliss. I don't really get involved in politics. I'm sure the politics is horrible here too. Italians are pretty corrupt. I mean, the system in Italy is pretty corrupt. That's probably where the Americans learned it from, from Rome. But I just find that the lifestyle is a lot quieter. The kids get a chance to grow up a little bit more normal still. It's just, for me, it's been a real revelation. And coming back and practicing here, only upper cervical, also, for me, it's set me apart from all the other chiropractors. When you're doing something that's special, like what Amy does, it's special. When you find a specialty in chiropractic and really hook into it and really get passionate about it and just go all in, you'll find that you're practicing different than pretty much all the other. It's what's going to set you apart, make you unique, make you attractive, make you fulfilled and successful.
Hmm. Hmm. Can you talk a little bit about your
That's
practice? Say
that's
it again.
kind of the way.
Huh?
I don't know what's going on.
Oh yeah, your screen got choppy for just the last 10 seconds.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. I appreciate you taking some time to share some insights. Is there anything else that you wish to share with chiropractic students that are already in school or with chiropractors that are getting out and trying to start their own practice? Either population could really use just any advice, any insights that they might not have heard in school or that they might just be able to hear today and come away with something that helps them.
All right. Well, the first thing is I'd say to listen to podcasts like Ben's because he's got some good stuff going on, and the questions were very appropriate, and I appreciated your line of questioning. Um, I think that for students, you need to surround yourself with positive people. It's real easy to be negative, especially in chiropractic school. So surround yourself with positive people, positive influences, positive role models. Get adjusted by as many different types of techniques as or chiropractors as you can find. Don't if you find that Gonset is a thing that you love, okay, great, but go and try the upper cervical group, and they have clubs on campus. Join as many clubs as you can and just get involved, and you'll have a better understanding of what you want to do when you get out. Also, try to find some good chiropractors, role models that you can, when you go to these people to get adjusted, or see if you can follow them around and ask them if you can shadow them or help them out in the office, even one day a week. I'll come in and I'll just, I'll clean the paper, paper baskets or something, just so that you get in the office and get a feel for what's going on. Especially when you're in the later, or semesters. If you're already out, a young doc, I suggest that you find a place where you want to live, where you're going to be happy. That's going to be the number one most important thing. Don't go where you think you're going to get the most money or you're going to get the best job or the best opportunity. Go where you want to live, okay, where you want to settle down. Because if you don't want to keep bouncing around as chiropractors, because you need to develop relationships, because that's what chiropractic is really all about. And the successful chiropractors develop relationships that last for lifetimes with their patients, and in fact, last generations. They go down into, and there's the parents and the kids and their kids. So it's the relationships that's the most important thing in chiropractic, I believe, because we see patients so much more than a regular doctor. So you need to develop good relationships. So if you're not happy, you're not going to develop good relationships. You're not going to, or negative. So you want to be positive, and if you're happy, you're going to be have a much better chance of being positive. And so find where you want to live, and then from there, go nice and slow. You can either associate in an office and, okay, I really like this area. Sometimes you associate with a doc that wants to eventually sell to you, or maybe open a satellite office with you. If you don't have the finances, if you have the finances, it's a whole other story. But I always think it's better to get a little bit of experience, get a little dipped before you get a little seasoned, before you just, go out there and throw all your hard earned money or saved up money down the toilet and realize, oh my God, what did I do?
Mhm.
I did everything wrong. It's too easy to fail in this profession. It is, because there's a lot that, in one sense, are, a lot of things are stacked against you. You're not the cultural authority in health, although you think you are, you're not. And so, or you might like to be, you're not. So you have to accept that, and you have to understand that you are still going to always be, for the most part, the second choice or the third choice or the fourth option. But that's okay, as long as they show up. I don't care when they show up. As long as they show up and they're still alive and breathing, there's still a chance.
I love that last message there. It's so valuable to have people go into school eyes wide open that, yeah, maybe we're not the first choice, second, or third choice. However, we provide a great value that's very distinct and different from any other place in the
Absolutely.
healthcare world. Or
Yeah.
it it's been an amazing journey for me as a chiropractor, I just got to say, and I'm just curious for you, looking back on all the people you've helped. Can you maybe just share a couple of quick stories of, um, things that nobody would ever tie to an atlas subluxation, or even just any other area in the spine, where you've had people come in, they've been to all the professionals, they come to you, and they have a completely different result, from what their expectation was.
Okay. Well, one story I remember very vividly. I had a patient of mine, and he was a young man in his late 20s, and he had already developed multiple sclerosis. And he came to me with multiple sclerosis, and there were the plaques were in his brain and in his spinal cord. And so we did a cycle of care with him over a 4 month period, where I saw him 24 times in 4 months. And at the end of those 4 months, he went back to the medical doctor and had another, it was an MRI at that time, or maybe it was a CAT scan, I don't remember. And the plaques had all shrunk, they had gotten smaller. They weren't all completely eliminated. He still had multiple sclerosis, but it had subsided tremendously. Now, I do know that multiple sclerosis waxes and wanes, goes up and down symptomatically. It's not always that you're in a terrible, terrible crisis, but, and I don't know if it actually heals and then gets worse again. But in this particular case, I'm going to say that the chiropractic must have had something to do with it, because after 4 months, he was very pleased and he was really happy and he felt much better. But more important was that those plaques, which were the plaques you see on the films, were really like 50 to 60% diminished or just gone. So that was one kind of interesting story. And I had another story of a fellow that came in, and he's a sanitation worker, and he has also diabetes, big heavy guy. And his one of his major complaints was that he didn't feel sensation in his feet. He had no feeling. He couldn't feel hot, cold, anything. His feet were like always numb. And after, I'd say, a couple of weeks or a month or two at the office, he came to me and he was crying. And I said, what, I don't know what happened. I'm sorry. Did I hurt you last time? I don't, I felt like I did. He says, no, for the first time in like 5 years, when I went to the bathroom, I could feel the cold marble floor on my feet. Now, I think the feet are pretty far away from the Atlas. I mean, it's kind of like about as far as way you can get without going to another body. But there was an effect. And the thing is that I wasn't treating his feet. I wasn't treating his symptoms in his feet, or I wasn't treating the other guy's symptoms or his plaques in his spine and the nervous system from the multiple sclerosis. I was just clearing and making sure the connection between the brain and the by making sure the atlas was not in a funny position, but was like this and not like that. And those were two things, just off the top of my head.
Awesome.
One more important thing.
Mm-hmm.
When I was practicing in New York, across the hall was a jeweler in a jewelry shop, or a jewelry. He was a jeweler, and he would sell the jewelry to the jewelry shops that he made. This was on 49th and 5th Avenue in Manhattan, 609 5th Avenue. Saks Fifth, St. Patrick's Cathedral. The Diamond District was on 47th Street. So the area was a very busy area on 5th Avenue. And this guy, I found out that he had a son, and the son was working with him. And the son started coming in to see me. And the son eventually became a chiropractor. He went to Life Chiropractic College, and he became a chiropractor. His name is Robert Shire. Very, very nice guy. And he's still practicing to this day. And a wonderful guy. And he just contacted me just yesterday and said, he said, you are my introduction to chiropractic, Peter. I've been in practice for 25 years. I've touched, adjusted, and influenced thousands of lives because of you. The world is less subluxated because of you through me. He goes, you never forget your first. Okay. Your mentorship and influence direct me to Life University, where I got a great education from Dr. Sid, DE, and everyone else. Yes, I opened an office in Rye, Brook, Westchester during COVID. I enjoy it now. I'm still in the city 3 days a week and 2 days in Rye-Brook. Nice balance. I've also become a motivational keynote speaker, and I'm in the process of writing a book called Listen to Your Mother. I will share more with you as it unfolds. My plan is to travel the world speaking to people and share the chiropractic story and awaken people to their infinite healing potential. Take care, my friend. I look forward to seeing you soon. I got this from this guy yesterday, who I haven't spoken to in like maybe 10 years.